Okay, so let me tell you all about my birthday. My youngest daughter, her birthday is very close to mine. I think we're 2 weeks apart. So we were celebrating together. We had family over, cake to do, dinner on the go, and my daughter had been given a recorder by her granddad. She was playing with it, and with the full just love and joy for a child that has just been given a noisy musical instrument, and you can imagine the delight on all our faces. But my middle son, he obviously then wanted a recorder. He didn't have one. So he wasn't okay about this. He was shouting, he was crying, he really wanted this recorder and he wanted it now. My eldest wanted to play battleships, just battleships now, with me whilst I'm cooking dinner and managing this recorder situation and trying to get a cake ready and welcoming family through the door. Now, I'm sure you've all been there. And then I want to be really honest about this because I think this really matters. I started getting hit and pushed, and it's not because my child is violent, or it's because he is completely overwhelmed. He's had school that day. He's also been to his clubs. He'd had a late night the night before as well because he'd done another club that night, and he finds it genuinely really hard to wind down after. And that's at, the best of times. But he'd come home to a birthday with family, with noise and a recorder, and a sister who had something that he absolutely didn't, and he really wanted it. And I was just standing in the middle of it all, trying to cook dinner, light candles, keep everyone happy, keep everyone regulated, say happy birthday to my daughter. I'm being hit and pushed, and I'm saying to myself, Claire, just hold it together. And I want to tell you what was actually happening to my nervous system in the moment, because I think this might be the episode that no one makes. Not the one about what to do when your child is dysregulated, but about what happens when your child is dysregulated and so are you at the same time. And there is nobody in the room who is not. We are all fully, neurodivergent household, and it is wild sometimes. So this is what it looks like to be a late diagnosed neurodivergent parent of neurodivergent children. And today we are going somewhere so personal: late diagnosis parenting, and the guilt that lives at the intersection of both, and the strange, complicated, often beautiful experience of looking at your child and seeing yourself. So I want to start with the moment that I recognised myself in my children, because it wasn't one moment, it was so many. But the ones that landed hardest were about character, about the parts of me that I'd always just called me before I had an idea of what to actually call them. The impulsivity. Gosh, my middle child and I are both profoundly impulsive, and I say it's not dramatic, but sometimes it can be. But in the way that we act on our thoughts before any rational part of our brains is really caught up, in the way that means that we say the thing, we do the thing before we've fully considered the consequence. We really feel like, actually, for example, this podcast is one of these. I literally came home from a school meeting, joked in the kitchen about starting up a podcast, and literally 2 weeks later, I am filming the podcast and have written out scripts, and the amount of work I did was actually kind of insane because I'd said it, so I was then fully committed to this mission and this journey. So it isn't always like jumping out of a plane impulsive. Sometimes it is other things as well. And I think as well, another thing is gosh, we really feel our feelings. I've always been described as the emotional one, and I can see that he is too, but now I understand what I didn't have words of for most of my life. And it's not that we're too much, it's that we just feel everything to a different degree than many people around us, and particularly neurotypical people. The volume is very different, the texture is different, and things just land deeper and they stay longer. And then, of course, there is the risk tolerance. Oh my gosh, I used to be a real risk taker. Genuinely, anything that was high octane, I was in. And since having children, I will be fair, that has reduced significantly. I am so much more risk averse now than I used to be. Although, if I'm honest, it's probably still higher than a lot of neurotypical people. My brain still leans towards the thrill, and it's just that the stake, I think it feels a bit different when you're responsible for other people. And obsessiveness, that relentless, the ADHD way of latching onto something and going completely, totally into it. I see that in both of my boys, in their special interests, which go so much deeper than mine ever did, in the way that they tell you everything about something that they love, in a way that my eldest in particular approaches a new chess position or a mathematical problem completely with everything. And then this is where it gets, a bit complicated, because looking at them, seeing myself is one of the most profound but disorientating experiences that I have ever had, because it means I understand them in a way that goes beyond perhaps traditional parenting advice or research or professional guidance, but it also means something else, and this one I find a little bit harder to sit with, and that is I actually feel really guilty that I have passed the neurodiversity side on. My middle son, he is, he's more extreme on the behaviours than I am. But the root of it, the way the micro criticism can switch off his love, the way he can go from abundant warmth to closed off in a moment that nobody else would have registered as significant. That's not a stranger's experience, that's mine. And I know that from the inside. And sometimes I look and I think, I gave him this, and I'm not sure whether or not to feel sad about that or something else entirely. And I want to be careful here, because I don't want to suggest that being neurodivergent is something to be sad about. It isn't. The grief isn't about his neurology, it's about the world he's going to have to navigate because of it. The world that wasn't actually designed for him. The same world that spent 36 years not designing itself for me either. And that's where the sadness sits. It's not in who he is, it's what he'll have to work harder to be understood as. And before I go any further into the personal, I want to give you some numbers, because one of the most important things that I have learned in this whole process is that when I recognise myself in my children, when I see my impulsivity or my emotional volume being reflected back at me, it isn't a coincidence. It is guilt. It is genetics. The heritability of ADHD is estimated between 70 and 80%, and some studies are actually putting this higher, between 64 and 90%, and that means that the genetic contribution to ADHD is comparable to the genetic contribution to height. So it isn't a parenting problem, it isn't an environmental problem, it is a very large part written into our DNA. Family, twin and adoption studies consistently show that ADHD runs in families. Research by Ferrone and Larson, two of the most cited researchers in ADHD genetics, puts heritability figure at 74%. That means if you have ADHD, there is a significant chance that your children will too. And if your children have ADHD, looking back at yourself is not paranoia, that is pattern recognition. Studies show that up to half of children with ADHD have a parent with ADHD. And here's the part that really matters for this episode. ADHD children with ADHD parents are far more likely to experience more intensive support needs at home, not because the ADHD parents are worse parents, but because two nervous systems in the same house, both running at full capacity, both without the regulation strategies that they need, that is genuinely harder. And it's a different kind of challenge, and it deserves to be named as such rather than blamed on the adults. And autism carries a very similar pattern of hereditary, and the co-occurrence of autism and ADHD, having both, is currently estimated around 30 to 40%, which means the family where multiple people have overlapping interacting neurodivergent profiles is not an outlier. It is statistically exactly what you'd expect. And none of this is your fault, and none of this is your child's. You both arrived at the same family with the same neurology, and you are both doing what you can with the brains that you have. And I need to talk about this really honestly, because I think a lot of late diagnosed parents are carrying this in silence. With my eldest, my husband and I I'll be very transparent here, we were congratulating ourselves on being great parents. He was breezy, he was bright, he hit his milestones, he was easy, he was happy. We genuinely thought, how are parents finding this so hard? And then when our middle child came, and everything I thought I knew about parenting turned out to be specific to a child whose neurology worked in a particular way, and I had absolutely no framework for a child whose neurology worked differently. I started soft because soft had worked before. I was light on discipline, easy on expectations, going with the flow, and it didn't work. And I didn't understand why. And then something in me, in that very ADHD all or nothing way that I have, decided I'd got it completely wrong. That I'd been too soft, that what he needed was structure, boundaries, firm, consistent consequences. So I swung completely the other way, and it made everything 10 times worse, because what I was doing with love, with genuine belief that I was helping, was taking the one thing his nervous system needed most, and that was safety and autonomy. The sense that he had some control, and his PDA profile responded to that in the only way it knew how. I didn't know at this point about his neurodiversities. I didn't have the right language. I just knew it wasn't working, and I kept pushing harder and harder in a direction that was completely wrong for him. And I think about that a lot. And I think about that version of him that was navigating all of that, a child whose neurology was never going to respond well to what it was I was giving him. And I feel something, and it doesn't really have a name. And there's something else that I really want to say, because if I don't say it, gosh, what's the point in this? When I am dysregulated, when my own nervous system is overwhelmed, and when I've run out of capacity, I can snap. I can snap at my children, and not because I want to, not because they deserve it, but because my dysregulation system has also hit a limit, and I can't always feel that coming in time. And I genuinely know that snapping is not just a snap for them. To a neurodivergent child, particularly a child with RSD, a sharp word lands totally differently to how it lands on a neurotypical child. The volume is amplified, the sting, it goes deeper, and it stays. And honestly, I am still working on this. Like, this isn't something that I've solved. It's something I'm in the middle of, and I think it's really important to say that, because this episode isn't about having it figured out. It's about being honest about what it's actually like. And people can say to you, oh, well, if you're just feeling dysregulated yourself, well, take yourself away for 5 minutes. And honestly, it's kinder to the child. And sometimes that is such a lovely theory, but in that moment, it's really hard to do. And you think, gosh, I'm the adult in this situation. I shouldn't shout at them and say, we're about to leave the house. Get your shoes and coats on. Like, that is sending him in completely the other direction. But yeah, I want to pause and give you perhaps a little bit of data, because I know how it feels to be in the middle of a hard day and believe that you are the only one struggling with this. And I want to tell you clearly, with evidence, that you are not alone in this at all. But somehow it feels like some kind of hidden secret. And I think that's why we're all kind of in this pool of late diagnoses. So 65% of parents of neurodivergent children are at a higher risk of burnout. And that's compared to around 33% of the general parenting population, meaning that parents of neurodivergent children are nearly twice as likely to be experiencing burnout as other parents. In fact, the research identifies parents of neurodivergent children as the highest risk group for burnout of any caregiving category. A Curtin University study found that 80% of caregivers of neurodivergent children experiencing poor well-being, high levels of stress and mental health issues, 80%, and that's more than 22% reported feeling even more socially isolated because of their experiences, because the judgment, the having to explain, the invisible complexity of what we're navigating can cut you off from the people around you. And there's a layer that almost no research has properly looked at yet. What happens when the parent is also neurodivergent? Now, these studies are only just starting to explore that, but obviously, given the data that I gave you in the earlier part of the episode, that the neurodivergent parents are likely the parents of the neurodivergent children, but they're likely also managing additional sensory sensitivities, their own emotional regulation challenges, and particular overwhelm that comes from navigating systems that they were definitely not designed for a neurodiverse brain. And you're not burning out because you're weak. You are not struggling because you are failing. You are carrying something that is genuinely, measurably, significantly heavier than most people around you understand. And you deserve the support that reflects that weight, not the advice that assumes that you have the same resources as a neurotypical parent in a neurotypical family. So we'll go back to my birthday now, because that day was what made it so overwhelming. It wasn't just the chaos, it was the stacking, it was the accumulation. My son had been at school all day, he'd had a late night before, he genuinely struggles with the wind down after. The physical intensity doesn't just stop when his body stops. And then he'd come home from all of this. There was the excitement, the guests, the presents, the noise of a celebration, a recorder being played right next to him, his sister getting something that he hasn't got. And that is not a child that's choosing to be difficult. That is a nervous system that has been at maximum capacity for hours and meeting one more thing that it just can't process. And I was standing there with my own nervous system, with my own dysregulation, building, trying to cook dinner, light candles, sing happy birthday, manage it all. And I was being hit and pushed. I was really trying to not react in a way that I'd regret. And I've been to parenting workshops. I've learned about the inner dinosaur, the idea that we all have something like a T-Rex inside of us, an ancient part of our nervous system that responds to threat before our brain has had a chance to catch up. And in those moments when the T-Rex is activated, sometimes the most useful thing is not to push through, and it is to step back. And even if that means being late, even if that means the candles don't get lit on time, even if that means saying, I need 5 minutes and I'll be back, because the 5 minutes of stepping away produces a version of you that can actually really help. And the alternative is two T-Rexes in the same room. And that, I promise you, I've been there. It really absolutely helps nobody. I know this, believe me. And in the moment on my birthday, it was the most impossible thing to do. And there's a concept in child development research called co-regulation. The idea that a parent's nervous system literally helps regulate a child's nervous system when the parent is calm, genuinely calm. And that's not just performing. A child can borrow from that stability. And it's why a child's presence when a child is distressed can help settle, even without words, just being there. The nervous systems are basically in a relationship with each other. And the flip side of that, believe it or not, is also true. So when a parent is dysregulated, the child's nervous system loses that stabilizing anchor. And in a family where both the parent and the child have nervous systems that are running hot, where they are both reaching their limits at exactly the same time, of course, given the co-regulation that I've just given you, there is no anchor. There are just two nervous systems that are amplifying each other. And this isn't a parenting failure. This is neuroscience. And naming it that way does not remove the responsibility to keep working on it. Absolutely not. But it does change what working on it actually looks like. And it shifts the question from why can't I control myself to not snap, to not shout, to not get angry, to what did my nervous system need that it didn't have in that moment? And that question, I think, leads us somewhere way more useful. And as you can tell, this is very much the honest version. This is not the aspirational parenting account. This isn't any Instagram parenting mum that's got her, what do they call them? Mucky trays. I can't even think of what they're called. That, you know, they've got all their trays out with their different activities planned. They've got their Ziploc bags with painting so they don't create. Like, this isn't that. This is very much real, honest, and my experience. And I want to tell you what knowing has given me, because this has genuinely given me something real. And I cannot claim that this has fixed everything, because obviously I am still neurodivergent and I do still get dysregulated myself, and this is like, I feel like it's the work of a lifetime, and I don't know, I wish I did know, if you kind of get through these things and you manage to be calm and regulated all the time, and I honestly don't know yet. But the biggest shift has been in how I understand my own reactions. When I lose my temper and I snap, when I raise my voice, when I do the thing that I promised myself I wouldn't do, I used to just call it a failure. Just, I'm a bad parent in that moment. Just, I've done the damage and I need to apologize and I need to try harder. But now I actually understand what's happening in that moment of dysregulation. It's not weakness. It's not a moral failure. It's my nervous system reaching its limit at the same time that my son does. That one shift in language has allowed me to be kinder to myself. Not to excuse it, but to understand it, and from understanding to start to ask different questions. Not why did I lose it, but what led up to that. Not I'm a terrible parent, but what were the signs that I could have caught this earlier. So I'm now taking more time for myself in a way that I never did before. Not enough, I don't think. I've not quite cracked it just yet, but more than I did. And I understand now that the time I take for myself, it's not selfish, it's the maintenance that makes me functional for them. And I'm learning actively and constantly, and I listen to other people in our community, knowing so much more than I do, who have been on this journey for longer. And I want to soak up everything, not because I want to perform being a good neurodivergent parent, but because I know that from every piece of understanding, that's eventually something that I can pass on. And I want to come back to the mirror, because I've talked about the hard parts, and they are real, but they are not also the whole picture. My middle child, when he feels safe, when the demands are off and the pressure is gone and he is just himself, loves with everything that he has. It's not small managed love, it is total and it is absolute. And I know what it feels like to feel at that volume. And there is something extraordinary about watching it in him, something that moves me in a way that I can't quite put into words. My eldest, his curiosity, the depth of his special interest, the way he will go so far into something that he loves, and that he comes back with things that floor me every time. I had some of that, but not to his extent. But I know the shape of that experience, the way a thing you love completely can feel like home. And I would never want to take that away from him. And the biggest hope I have for both of them, the thing I hold on to on the hard days, is I don't want them to reach 36 before they understand themselves. I don't want them to accumulate the years of micro criticisms and the masked distress and unexplained exhaustion before someone gives them the right words. That's why I got my eldest his diagnosis. Not only because he was struggling, though he was, but because I thought, if he has this language now, if he understands this about himself whilst he's younger, he has decades of advantages that I didn't have. And here is something I've come to think of as an intergenerational gift. When a parent receives a late diagnosis, it doesn't just explain their past, it potentially changes their children's future, because now there is someone in their life who knows what it feels like from the inside, who doesn't need it explained, who can say, I know what it feels like to feel everything at that volume. I know what it is when a small thing can completely undo you. And I know, and it's okay. That is not a small thing to be able to offer to your child. It might be one of the most valuable things. That is the gift of knowing. Painful as sometimes the knowing is, it is still a gift. I want to spend a bit of time on this because I think this may genuinely matter to some of you, and I wish someone had explained it to me before I started. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I know it sounds very clinical and quite alarming, but this is what it actually is. It's a therapy that helps the brain reprocess traumatic memories. And it's not by talking about them in detail, but it's about working with the body's response to them. And it uses something called bilateral stimulation, usually guided by eye movements side to side. It can also be tapping or sounds while you hold a distressing memory in mind. And what that bilateral stimulation does, broadly speaking, is engage the brain's natural healing process, the same mechanism that works through difficult experiences during your REM sleep. And it helps memories that have become stuck, that keep firing the same emotional and physical responses years later, to be processed and integrated properly. Crucially, EMDR is not a talking therapy in the conventional sense. You don't have to describe your trauma in detail. You don't have to build a narrative around it. For many people, particularly for people with ADHD, whose sustained verbal processing can be genuinely difficult, and that is actually the significant advantage. Research suggests significant symptom reduction within 6 to 12 sessions for single incident trauma. For more complex or accumulated trauma, which is often what we're looking at really in late diagnosed adults, the process can take longer, but it moves. And here is the specific reason that I think EMDR is particularly relevant for our community. Adults with ADHD, we accumulate what researchers call small traumas over a lifetime, and not necessarily one catastrophic event, but repeated, accumulated experiences of shame, of being misunderstood, of being called too much, too sensitive, too disruptive, of failing publicly at things that seem to come easily to everyone else, of the rejection, of the micro criticisms, the sense that something was just fundamentally wrong with you long before anyone thought to look for a different explanation. And EMDR is specifically recognised for its effectiveness in healing shame, rejection, trauma, including the kind that is linked to RSD, peer exclusion, negative beliefs built across years of experience, and the painful patterns built in relationships. And these are not peripheral to the ADHD experience. For many of us, they are central to it. I want to say clearly, and I will say this, I'm doing a further episode on EMDR, but please do not attempt to work this alone. It needs to be undertaken with a qualified, trained therapist, as there's a reason why it's structured and guided. Opening these things without the right support can cause harm rather than healing. So make sure you talk to your GP, talk to a therapist. The EMDR Association in the UK is a really good starting point for finding a qualified practitioner. But if you have been in CBT and you found it useful but not quite reaching the root of things, if you have the sense that the thoughts you're managing are symptoms of something deeper that isn't shifting, it might just be worth asking your therapist or your GP whether trauma therapy, including EMDR, might be worth exploring. For me in particular, it has made the biggest difference, and it's really hard. It's you're opening up essentially really raw wounds, but actually it's making me manage those feelings much better. So if you are a late diagnosed parent sitting right now with the guilt of it, with wondering whether your diagnosis explains everything you got wrong, I want to say something to you. You didn't get it wrong. You got it with what you had. And if you did it all again, knowing what you knew then, you probably would do exactly the same thing, because you were working with incomplete information in a system that didn't give you what you needed. And that's not your failure, that's the system's failure. And honestly, the guilt, it doesn't go away overnight. I know that because I'm still in it. I'm still working through moments that I wish had gone differently. I still replay conversations, still sit with things that I said that I know landed wrongly for my children's nervous systems. But here's what I'm also learning, and there is a certain amount of genuine trauma in late diagnosis that really does deserve to be acknowledged, not indulged, but named. You have felt all of these micro criticisms across the span of your life, real or perceived, it doesn't matter, and you cannot undo them. But what you can do is you can do the work on what they built inside of you, and you can start to understand your patterns. You can get support, CBT, EMDR, whatever it is that helps your particular nervous system, and you can begin slowly to separate what happened from who you are. And none of us have all the right answers. What works on Monday might be completely different and completely useless by Friday. And that's not a failure either. That's it, it's life. And this in particular is complicated, but also beautiful. Even if you had all the knowledge in the world, you would still make mistakes. And that's because that's part of being human, and being human inside of a neurodivergent family is a constant real-time improvisation, and that's what you're doing every day. And even if on the birthday with the recorder and the battleships and the cake, especially on that day, if anything today hit home, I've made a little free thing that I think you'll like. It's called 2-Circle Reset, a 5-minute way to put down something when you're carrying too much. It's completely free. It's in the show notes and the link in my bio. And it's the easiest way to make sure that you don't miss what's coming next as well. It'll connect you into the email list as well. So if any of this has landed for you, if you've recognised yourself in it or your family, I'd genuinely love to hear from you. Come and find us over at the Weighted Blanket community on Facebook. And you don't have to have anything figured out, just absolutely come as you are. And the question I always ask, and I really want your answer on this one, is what do you wish someone had told you about yourself or your child before you had to figure it out the hard way? Come and tell me, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next one. See you. Bye.